The following presentation was recorded live at the Richmond Marriott in Richmond, Virginia for the 29th Annual International Association of Square Dance Callers Convention. This is tape number 32, Digital Music.
This is a digital music interest session, and I'd like to welcome you here. My wife, Debbie, out there is passing out handouts. There's two handouts, one that each of us has written up. My name is Vic Cedar. I'm going to be the moderator, and I'll show you some demos of programs and things later. Chris Jensen is our panelist, and I guess we might as well start. Here's Chris.
Well, all right. I was going to give you an overview of where we've been and where we're going and sort of an outline of some of your options if you want to go to digital music. But first I'd like to see how many of you are using digital music when you call your dances. Okay, a few. How many of you are buying CDs for music? Okay, so that means you're having to look at digital music because once you go with CDs, that's digital and you can't get it back to vinyl. One of the things that I'd like to just mention as a motivating factor is on the first page of this handout, I have a chart which I went through the Hanhurst Record Service handouts, actually I did it online, for the last year and just started counting tracks. Okay, and I counted the number of tracks that were issued on vinyl. And I counted the number of tracks that were issued on MP3, and I counted the number of tracks that were issued on CD. Now there's some overlap there, and I tried anything that was available as vinyl is in the vinyl category, because if you want to keep using records, you can. Okay, but the things that were available as MP3 or CD only show up on the graph. And if you'll notice, in January of this year, there were more tracks available on CD than there were on vinyl. All right. The big spike in August of last year, by the way, is when Lumac released two compilation CDs that had 10 tracks each on them. One was pattern, one was singing. So that meant there were a lot of CD tracks that month. But as you can see, more and more new music is coming out on CDs. So that means we're looking at digital in the future. Okay. So when I'm talking, I was going to first talk about the source, how we get our music. And we can get our music, we've always gotten them as records. Very easy. You know, you throw them on the turntable and go. Now more records are available as CDs, and some records are becoming available as MP3s. Right? Does everybody know what an MP3 file is? Vic explains it on his handout. An MP3 file, it's a computer file. You take an audio recording and you do some compression on it, and you can get about a 10-to-1 compression on it to make it into a much smaller file, which is then easy to keep on your computer or transfer online. All right, I'm going to just give you briefly my take on the advantages of the various formats. Vinyl is easy. All right, we're used to it. The disadvantages from a caller's point of view is that they wear out. That might be an advantage from the distributor's point of view, but from my point of view, they wear out and get scratchy. CDs, the advantage is that it's digital. It's easy for the producers because they can just burn a CD when they burn the CDs as they need them. They don't have to pay for a 200 or 300 unit production run. And from a user's point of view, you get a lot of material. I don't know how many of you have been looking at the CDs that are available now, but when you buy a CD, you get the vocal track, the instrumental track in several different keys, the instrumental track sometimes with vocal backing and sometimes not, the instrumental track with maybe a different mix, more percussion if you want to use it as a patter record, the instrumental track or a vocal track with the vocal on one side or one track and the instrumental on the other tracks. So if you play it stereo, you can sort of bring up the vocal and harmonize with Jerry's story. So you get a lot of music on CDs. MP3s, the advantage is that you can download them virtually immediately from when you buy them. When I did an order from Hanhurst, from Supreme Audio, and I bought an MP3 file because some of the cuts are only available as MP3s. And I got email back fairly quickly with a list with some URLs, some addresses that I just clicked on, and it immediately started downloading the MP3s on my computer. So if you need records, if you need music for a dance, and that night, you can do it with MP3s. You can order an MP3, get it, assuming that you have a way of playing them at your dance, which brings us to the output part of this. Once you have your CD or your MP3, how are you going to play them at the dance? And I think that's where a lot of people are having to make some choices. Okay, there are a number of options. I have gone through several different, two different options. I started using mini disc in 1995, and I gradually began to record all of my vinyl onto mini discs. I had two reasons for doing that. One, I wanted to be able to carry a lot of music in a small space. So in a 3x5 index card box, I could carry 500 or 600 musical selections. And I really liked that. My other reason as a woman is that I wanted to be able to change the pitch on some of the records. And if I could carry a pitch shifter with me. How many women have used a pitch shifter and carried it around with you? And, it's sort of a pain. By recording onto mini discs, I could do the processing at home, record it in the right pitch on my mini disc, and have that with me. So those were my two reasons for going digital when I did. So mini discs are one option. CD players are another option. And there are some new CD players that offer some fairly cool features for calling purposes. They have tempo changing, independent pitch changing. You can set marks on them so you can loop. So with newer CD players, there's some interesting things that you can do. Then you can, for MP3s, you can use MP3 players. How many of you have seen the iPod? You'll notice I'm a Macintosh fan. The iPod is a little, very small, 5 gigabyte MP3 player. All right, so you can hold 5 gigabytes worth of music, which in Square Dance terms is probably about 600 records, maybe 700 MP3s. Anyway, quite a few.
I would think it's more than the thousands, like 3,000 or so.
Okay. All right, so quite a few MP3s on a thing that's smaller than a cigarette package. Okay, and you can just take that with you. All of these devices have to be plugged into an amplifier. All right, we're not getting away from having to carry an amp. You can get smaller amps than this, however. And you still need a speaker and you still need a microphone. But our question is, how are we going to play our digital music? So an MP3 player. There are two kinds of MP3 players. There are MP3 players that are strictly RAM-based, if you will, or you record your songs, copy your songs onto smart media, little tiny cards, and they can be very small. I've seen them, like that big. Or you can get a disc-based MP3 player, and those are like the iPod, or you can even get a 20 gigabyte disc-based MP3 player. It has a 20 gigabyte hard drive in it, so you could have a lot of music on that. The disadvantages of an MP3 player that I see are looping, trying to do your loops for playing your music, for pattern music, tempo control. I haven't seen any that have very good tempo control. And then just keeping track of your songs. But I think that a lot of the MP3 players have good navigation abilities to find the songs that you want to play. So we have CD players, mini disc players, MP3 players. We have CD players that play MP3 files. So you could put several hundred MP3 files on a single CD and play that in a CD player. So that's another option for playing your music. Again, you run into looping control and tempo control as issues in that. The final option that I see, and probably the most expensive but the most flexible option, is to use a laptop. And you have your MP3s loaded onto your laptop. You take your laptop to the dance. Using software that Vic will demonstrate, you can loop, you can change the tempo, you can change the pitch independently. You can keep track of all your music. You can have playlists. You can just go through and very easily find what you want to play. You can program your dance in advance. You can have your choreography in front of you. You can have your lyrics in front of you. All of that is available on the laptop. So those are your options. And the question is, which way are you going to go? And that really depends on a number of factors. At the end of my handout, I sort of tried to give you some sort of different ways of going for different purposes. All right, the least expensive way, I think, is a CD player, because you could buy a relatively inexpensive CD player, keep your vinyl, bring your little portable CD player with you to the dance. If you need to buy new music that only comes on CD, you can do that, use your CDs, keep your vinyl, and go from there. You could do that for as little as $20 for an inexpensive portable CD player. Okay, the most flexible option, as I said, I believe, is a laptop doing MP3s. The most flexible option without a computer, I think, is mini disc, because I think you can record you can record from vinyl to your mini disc, you can record from CDs to your mini disc, and you can get most of the advantages of digital output. The only problem would be MP3s. And for songs that are only available as MP3s, you need to have a friend who has a computer to do that, because MP3s really require a computer. Okay, and then in between the input and the output, there's the processing. How do we get the music from one form to another form? All right, and I did a very confusing little chart here that had arrows and diagrams and things like that. Both Vic's and my handouts will be available online at Vic's website. So for those of you on the tape who may be going, well, she's talking about all these things in this handout, check online at www.cedar.net, and the handouts will be there, so you can find them. So to go from a CD to a laptop, Vic is going to talk about that. To go from MP3 to a laptop or a mini disc player or an MP3 player, you have to first go to the computer, get your MP3 file, and then you have to either download for some equipment like an MP3 player or record for an MD player from the laptop to your final output. So as you can tell, all of this requires some work initially to do your initial setup, to get your music into your digital format. But once it's done, it's done. The music doesn't wear out. It's there. You can keep using it. Once you get it done, you can then just add incrementally as you get new music. It doesn't take all that long to add your new music to the system. So that's an overview. Now what Vic is going to talk about is the real nitty-gritty process of going from vinyl to MP3s, because that's the system that both he and I are using, and we're both doing that. So, are there any questions about this overview, about any of your options in terms of output? Questions? You want to see it in action, don't you? All right, Vic.
Okay. First off, I have a CD up here, and if you look near the back of my handout, it has a list of 3 or 4 software products out there. There are many software products available for your computer. And so most of these tasks here can be done by several different products. I've listed some of the major ones here. First one I'd like to look at is the third one here, called Audio Grabber. And what that does, let me find it here. Here it is. Let me load up a CD. The Audio Grabber program is a very easy program to use. Plop in your CD into the computer. Start up the program. It's got a big hand that reaches out that grabs the disc. And basically what it does is it reads in your CD, and if you're connected to the internet, it'll actually go out and see if it can find the actual titles that are on for each track on there. It's got something that goes and queries the internet. So you just select whatever tracks you want. I'm going to select track 1. Go up here to this big grab hand, click that, and it goes out and it'll read in the track from the CD. And that will basically create you a WAV file, which is practically the same as a CD file. It's the raw, uncompressed digital data. And then you can take that and send it through some other processes I'm going to show you in a bit here to edit that file, to tweak it however you want, change the pitch, change the tempo, whatever you want to do to it. And then you can save that as an MP3 file and play it.
Where is that going to?
This is going to, well, right now it's going to the are my hard disk, probably right here, audio grabber output files. There it is, 01-track 1. And it should be about done here. Yes, it's done. And you can have audio grabber configured to grab everything off the CD at once. You can have it configured to automatically convert all those to MP3. It's a very easy program to use. And it's only $20. And there's probably several programs out there that'll do the same thing, available for free for downloading at various internet sites. So right now, we have this file here. And when I double click on it, it brings up, this is the Windows Media Player. And where's the play button? About there. Is it on? Oops. Where? Oh, there. It's playing. It's playing, but it's not.
No, it's playing.
There you go. I don't use this player much, so. Oh, this is off. That's why. Here comes
Matt, so take me right back to the track, Jack.
So I just took this one off of the CD, and I can do whatever I want with it. Get out of there.
Vic, how hard is it to take vinyl
Oh,
and
yes.
record that?
To do, that's the next step here. Question. State your name, where you're from.
Pat Bush. I have Easy CD Creator.
Mhm.
Are you familiar with that one?
Yes.
Does that do that? Create a WAV file when you?
Easy CD Creator writes stuff to a CD ROM. It does not read stuff from a CD-ROM and put it on another one. You can copy. You can make copies of CD-ROMs with it. You can put a CD-ROM in one and copy the entire thing to another copy. Whoa! Don't do that again. It's like going to the sushi bar and getting too much wasabi. Okay. Where was I? Oh, yeah. Actually, I create several CDs. Whenever I make a copy, a record to an MP3, I also make a CD at the same time and store that on CD for backup. Another thing I do is I'll take records, put on the called side, and I'll collect a bunch of like singing calls I want to learn, put them all on a CD, take that in the car with me, listen to it. So it's just like making a tape. Make a CD instead. So that won't work. What we have instead is something called Cool Edit. And what this will do is, although I don't have a record here. Anybody got a record? Yeah, I got one. Let me play this up.
Or at least tell us what you're doing on the tape.
Okay, right now we're trying to hook up a record here. We need a RCA guy. I wasn't actually going to plan on doing this. I have some pre-recorded bad records that I was going to play around with and clean up and remove scratches and all that stuff. But basically what you do is once you get it hooked up, you go up here to File, New, and then, yes, what you do to hook up is you go into your microphone input on your computer, coming out of it's usually the tape output, or here it looks like it's music out. And this should be the low level output coming from your amplifier. If you go out if you come in from the speaker output, you might blow your sound card to shreds and then have to go through all the technical support trying to get a new sound card. Not a good thing to do. Thank you. We are going to record a little bit from the Hilton. All right. Whoops. Oh. File New. And I've selected a sample rate, mono, and 16-bit resolution. A lot of this digital music, you can tweak the resolution and the amount of bits and the amount of data saved to get basically whatever kind of sound you want. What I'm choosing here is a standard, except for the mono part, a standard, what would be on normal CD, for example. So down here at the bottom, there's a little red record button. I press that, Should start recording. Hopefully we're going in the right place. Yeah, we're not getting it here. Nope. This computer I actually haven't recorded on yet, so let's skip this exercise. The trick to doing this is to hook it up from the music out, the low output from the amplifier, going into your microphone over here, and the microphone on the laptop. And it's important when you do this to go down this little volume control thing here at the bottom. It's a little speaker. If you double click on that, it brings up the Windows mixer. And in order to record, you have to go to Options, Properties, Recording, and make sure the microphone thing here is checked. That'll get your microphone input. And then, oh, here's a problem. This is way down low. Push that puppy up. That should work. Let's try it again. Yeah.
Does the volume on the amp matter?
It's not coming in high enough.
Oh, the wave, you'll see the wave?
Yeah.
It looks like an EKG when it's recording.
Yeah.
So you know for sure it's recording.
Let me pull in one that I recorded. I have my other laptop. This is one problem with digital music, is that it takes a while to configure your system, your computer, to initially get it going. Once you've got that down, write it down, label the chords, and you'll have it set. So, yes. Question in the back.
Tom Dillner. It's not so much as a question as a comment. It's very important, even when you set up the audio grabber, set your folder up. You need to know where the stuff's going. You know, when you record it and then try to find it, it might take you a while. So make sure you set the folder up. And Vic's very correct in the fact that it's going to take you a while to fine-tune. You may have to record something 5 or 6 times to get the levels where you want them. The 16 that he went to may not be what you want. You might want it at 22. You might want it at 44. So you're going to have to play around with that to get it to where you want it.
Right. Lots of trial and error. So right here, for example, is this is a waveform from something called Ben's Bounce. It's something that Ben Rubright, a caller down in Florida, made the music for. Oops, and we're not connected there. Right. Turn down the volume a bit, just in case. So here's this program that we're running here is called Cool Edit. This is a music editor. It's just like Microsoft Word that edits a file, but this edits a music file. So here's the music wave as it's going. I'm going to stop it right now and increase it a little bit. As you see, you've got this waveform. I'm zooming in more and more and more. And the more I zoom in, then all of a sudden, look, there's little dots. Each one of those dots is a little bit of digital information that's saved for the wave. And you can actually go in and edit these and move them around and all that stuff. Let's see if I can get it back. And there's the whole file. Right now I'm going to pull in a file and show you how a bunch of editing stuff goes. This is an old file here called Jingle Jangle Jingle on Sets in Order. And I got this from a bunch of records I got from like a garage sale kind of thing. And so I decided, well, I'll put this on here because it's got lots of scratches. And here's my first attempt at recording this record. It's a pretty bad attempt. In the beginning here, I've got this large spike where I had the volume on the turntable turned up too high. So I turned it down, then it got a little bit lower. But here's kind of what it sounds like. I realized it was up too high, so I turned it down. I decided to start over again. So the first thing you can do with an editor is you can do cut and pasting. So right now I've selected this selection at the top of the file. I'm just going to hit the delete button, and it's gone. Okay, so now I've got this file. A little bit of static in the beginning. We're going to use that in a minute. And here's the music. Now, the next thing that I usually do to my music after I've recorded it is I want the volume to be the same for all music that I record, and that's called normalization. So I would On Cool Edit, you would go to Transform, Amplitude, and then go to Normalize. And that's going to take the amplitude of the music and increase it to about the same size. Here I've got it set to 100%. I'm going to skip this step. And now what it's doing is it's increasing the volume for this music. Having all your music at the same volume is very nice because you don't have to like twiddle the volume control each time. So here we go. It's expanded it. And you can see here at the beginning of the music, we've got, this is noise up here. So when I play this is going to sound like scratches and stuff. So you can hear some scratchy stuff going on in the background. Then, yes, question.
At some points when you're doing this work, you get loss from what you're doing. Could you tell us at that points when you're doing the loss, when a loss would occur?
Okay. What he's referring to is when you do the conversion from the WAV file or the raw audio data, which is what I have right here right now. When you convert that into an MP3 file, we haven't gotten there yet. That's when you lose stuff.
You just altered the volume now. Does that result in loss, or have we lost nothing so far?
You have not lost anything there.
Okay, so whenever you do anything, whenever you do anything that results in loss, let us know. Okay.
Okay. Well, I've cut off the first part of the file, which is garbage. Right? It's lost. It's gone. I mean, certainly you can undo a lot of the steps you've done. Right? Okay. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do some noise reduction. The first step to that is to select the. So you need a piece of the music that is the noise itself, because basically what you're going to do is you're going to take the noise and subtract that from the rest of the waves.
It's not necessarily good loss. You are losing because it's looking at the frequencies of the noise, and it's taking out those frequencies from the whole thing. So any other music that happened to match that, you would be losing.
Yeah, this particular piece of music is rather noisy, as you can see by the selection I've chose here. If this was like not very noisy, it'd be very small. Okay, so what I do is here, go up again to Transform, which is where you do most of your editing. Go to Noise Reduction, and then over here it says Get Profile from Selection, which basically says get the noise information from what I've selected. And it went and did that. Then I go and I'll select the whole file this time. Then I'll say Transform. Noise reduction, go back in there, and this time I'll click the OK button, which is now going to go through and remove the kind of waveform stuff that I just gave it in the profile. And I'm going to skip this step so it doesn't take us long. Now you don't have to do noise reduction on all records, just like the bad ones, because you're actually going to, once we're done with this, the record will sound a little bit different because it's lost some of the uniqueness to it. But it's going to be much more usable because it's not going to have all the scratchy poppy stuff. And in some records it turns out really well, and others, if that are really scratchy, I mean, it's a mess. But
now, did you actually purposely put some snap, crackle, pop in there so that you would have a profile to work from?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
Well, I mean, I loaded right about here where at the very left-hand side of the screen is where I put the needle down, you know, and it goes around for 3 or 4 times, and it's got the scratchy part. And that's the part you select. You need that if you need to do noise reduction. I'm going to cut it out at the end. So here we are. We're done. And you'll see that the first part of the file now is like very flat line. Like it's reduced. It's taken all that noise off there and a lot of the noise off at the end here. Tom, do you...
Just a comment. If you want to, you don't have to select the small part. You can pick the whole song. And you can also say, back on the screen right before he went there, it gives him an option to say, within this range, go clean all this out in the whole song at one time. But what he's doing is he's taking a sample. But you can do the whole song within a range and do it in one step also.
Okay, good. So now this will sound a little bit different here. Start it off. You don't hear anything because there's basically nothing there. There's a little blip. So now there's no more scratches on the music, but you have lost some of the dynamics of it there because that was a particularly bad, scratchy one. So the next thing I do with this is I would take and I get rid of the stuff at the beginning. Just delete that. Get rid of this blank space at the end. Delete that. So there's a waveform that I could save and then convert to MP3. I'm going to do a few more things to it here. What would you do?
I would go through and I would sing the song and see if it's in my range. And if it wasn't in my range, I would then do one of the other transformations that Vic can do on his, its time and pitch. We are still in Cool Edit. And from here, you'll notice that he can choose, he's doing a pitch shift, and there's a place where you can transpose up or down. Now, my technique for this is I know whether I want to lower it or raise it. All right, and I would pick an amount that I think would be right. I would take the first minute of the song, because this is a lengthy transformation. I would take the first minute of the song, do the transformation on it. Okay, he's just choosing less than a minute. I would choose a minute so that I could actually sing and see if I can hit all the notes in that range after I've transformed it. And then I would undo that and transform the whole piece. Assuming that it was the right amount. He's going to go way up, right? Make it really extreme here. And he's sharpening it up 8 steps. 8 half steps. And as you can see, this is a slow process. So that's why I do trial sections first before I transform the whole thing. However, you can also get MP3 players on your computer that will do real-time pitch shifting while you're playing the record. So if you choose not to go through this, you can still change the pitch without changing the tempo, just in software while you play the record.
One thing about doing what Chris said is, I have noticed that for a Winamp plugin that I have that does this, if you have a slow computer, it doesn't work as well as a fast computer.
What do you use?
The slow computer is a 233 megahertz machine that I have. Fast, I have 850.
Would you recommend when you're recording from vinyl using a Hilton or using some other finer stylus?
I use a finer stylus. I do it off my home system, and I prefer the sound that I get from that.
Any more comments? Nope. So let me play this section that we've just done. First, I'll start off in the area of the normal song, then it'll change over to the new pitch. Oh, I did do it extreme.
Notice that the tempo did not change, only the pitch changed.
And there's many other filters on here that you can do. They're under filters. And you can go and do things like whatever you would do with like an equalizer. You can go and change, boost the treble, boost the bass, what have you. So there's all sorts of functions and things you can play around with. And you can get your music sound really distorted if you'd like. There's probably also filters that make it sound like an old used record if you're interested in that. So right now I'm going to save this file. I'm going to save as. And right now I can save it as a WAV file, or I'm going to choose MP3 here. I'm going to save it in my root directory. And fine. And then here, give me a couple different options for compression ratios and stuff. I'm going to take the default. And then it has to, right now, it's converting the file as it's saving it. Yes, Tom.
A comment. What Chris was saying a while ago about using a different turntable to play the songs, we have to keep in mind we've been using vinyl for so long. And the only reason she's going to a different turntable is it had some of the other digital professional equipment that's out there has less whoa and flutter to it. Something we really don't hear playing our vinyl records. So let's not get too far out in left field thinking we have to get this thing so precise to make this digital file. It's cleaned up even from the beginning when you start. Okay, so you don't have to get it so clean, squeaky clean as I say. Get it to where you like the sound, the feel of it. He talked about taking some things out. He's losing a little fidelity is what he's actually losing, okay? But he made the point. You can put that right back in on the back side. It's just going to take you a little longer on your computer to do it, but you can put it right back.
Right. You can just pop the record down, record it in, save it as an MP3, and you don't have to go through all those extra steps. It's just to show you the different kinds of things you can do.
Simple question. Norm Wilcox, Georgetown, Ontario. Cool Edit, is it available on the internet or?
Cool Edit is available for downloading on the internet. There's two versions out there. One is a free trial 60-day version that you can download, and it's somewhat reduced. You can only do two of its major functions at once. Or you can pay, it's only $69, and it's a full-fledged editor. I mean, it's like Microsoft Word. It's got this and that and hundreds of things you can do. It's once you know what you're doing.
Virgil Forbes, Laurel, Maryland. Chris, I want to mention, I also work from my best turntable. I've got about 4, and I've got a very good home stereo, because once you put the music onto the disc, you can only manipulate what's there. So you want to get the best possible digital file onto your disc before you start playing, because if you get a sloppy one, such as if your Hilton needle is about half worn out, you know, garbage in, garbage out.
Pat Bush again. Do we need if I made the WAV file, do I have to make an MP3 file?
No, you do not. You can use the WAV file. It's just a typical WAV file, like the one like I just created here, or the one that I used, I believe is about 20 megabytes. A typical MP3 file is either 1.7 megabytes for a mono version or like 3.4 for a stereo version. The advantage to using MP3 is that you can store a lot more of them in the same amount of space.
But if you decided to use CDs as your output medium, then you would keep the WAV file, burn it to a CD as an audio CD, and go from there. So you would not use your laptop for calling. You would use your laptop to make the digital recording and then make CDs to take with you to the dance.
So you couldn't put an MP3 file on a CD and play it on a CD player. It wouldn't work.
There are specialized CD players that will play CDs with MP3 files on them, but they are specialized equipment. Not every CD player will do that.
At McAtee, but we haven't addressed the looping. If you just stick it on a CD, you still want to loop the music somehow so you can use it to call?
Okay, there are several ways of handling that. I know somebody who uses an MP3 player, and how he's handling the looping is he just makes long recordings. All right, because he has 20 gigabytes on his MP3 player, he just makes his patter records 10 or 8 or however many minutes long you want, and goes from there. If you want to do looping on a CD player, you need to divide your record into tracks on the computer and then record those tracks to the CD, and you would do your intro track, your middle track, and your closer track, and then you could put your CD in single track repeat mode on the middle track. All right, there are specialized some of the new CD players, you can mark tracks on the fly. I watched them do that at the Palomino booth, and mark the tracks as you go. When you get to the end of the intro, hit a button. When you get to where you want it to loop, hit another button, and it'll just start playing that looping thing. But it doesn't save that information, so you would have to do it each time you played the CD. If you do mini disc players, you can mark tracks on your mini disc itself. So I find mini disc, next to laptops, I find mini disc the easiest to do the looping on.
For those of us who are mini disc-ized, if you could just discuss the pros and cons of using MP3s, if it's even possible, what you can perceive to be the loss would be going from copying the MP3 from your computer into the mini disc. Talk a little bit about the different files that are created during this process and what you think the output would be.
Okay. I'm assuming that you're talking about buying an MP3 from one of the distributors and having it on your computer and then putting it on a mini disc. All right. That would be, you are doing two lossy translations. You're doing the initial MP3, but I've been assured that the MP3s that are being created right now from Supreme, which is the only one distributing MP3s right now, are very high quality. So they are, yes, they're compressed, but they're compressed with high quality, not low bit rates and such. So you have a good MP3. Then you're doing a translation to get to the format for mini disc, which is a track. That's another algorithm or another file format for compressed files. You are having two generations of loss. My personal feeling is when it's played on a Hilton over the speakers that we use for square dancing, with you calling over it, it doesn't matter.
Okay, perhaps you could discuss a little bit about the difference between MP3s. Apparently all MP3s are not created equal.
That's right. well, let's see if we can get back to Winamp here, or excuse me, CoolEdit. When you create an MP3, MP3 is basically just a file specification. It doesn't actually say how you're supposed to make that file. It says how the file actually is formatted. So there are different programs will encode to MP3 differently. And most programs, like when we bring up, let's open one of those files again. Open the WAV file. When you from here, when you say save as, and you go to MP3, hopefully it'll bring up the. Okay, so right here, it's giving me a list of about 7 or 8 different ways of encoding that MP3 file. It's got here this ratio column shows you how much it's going to contract it.
You're in CoolEdit and you went what file?
I went to File, Save As, selected MP3, and now it's come up with a list of MP3 encoder options. And you can play around with the different ones and see which one sounds best to you. Generally, the more resolution or fidelity, the larger the file. Run.
So is that a function of the ratio number is how fine the sound is? What do you look for there when you pick which option you take there?
Well, the option that I have selected is about the same resolution that you get on a CD, a normal audio CD. It's 128 kilobits per second and a 44.1 megahertz rate. This is about standard. The one below it is a little bit higher.
Do all of these options play on a standard MP3 player?
Yes.
Will it know what you've recorded it in?
Yes.
And bring it back properly?
Mm-hmm.
Good.
We thought we'd have someone with the standard square dance clothes, like run around and do that.
Well, now it's time for a DOS dummy to talk. If I contacted Supreme Audio and I downloaded something I wanted, an MP3, and I do know what that is, how will I then attach my mini disc player to my computer? Will I attach it to the speaker outlet of my sound card? And then do I need software to transfer this MP3 file into my mini disc player? Does it have to be transferred to some other type of format? I'm not sure I understand all that.
Okay, you would go, well, actually on PC hardware, I think if your sound card has a line out on it, you would go from the line out on your sound card to the line in on your mini disc player, and you could just play the MP3 on your computer and record on your mini disc, just as if you were playing the MP3, just as if you were playing a record on your turntable. Okay, there are new mini disc players that are having what's called NetMD, where you can actually put them in a USB cradle, attach it to a USB port on your computer, and it will do a digital transfer of the MP3 to the mini disc format. It'll do it all digitally without having to do a digital to audio and audio to digital conversion on that, and it will transfer it faster than real time. Okay, but that's the newest generation of mini disc players. And there are some other issues with those that I'd be happy to, I don't own them because I've gone to MP3s on the computer, but I have looked at them recently, and they're very cool, but they also have some limitations.
Yes.
Thank you, Vic. Thank you, Chris. Bill Hyman from New Hampshire. Just a couple of really quick comments. First of all, I agree with everything that's been said at the podium. I completely second all of your comments. Secondly, if you'll go to cedar.net and go to Vic's MP3 page, there is a wonderful three-page down long page that describes really grip for grip how to do what Vic is talking about. If you go to my website, and I'll give you a web correction in a moment, I have the basics of MP3s. The icon is right on the front of the Handhurst page. If you click on that, that is a very long page that has most of this information on it. If you want all of the settings that we use and that we generally recommend, subject to your computer and things that you're using, all of the bit rates and everything else are posted on our website with a click-by-click, graphic-by-graphic instruction. Every screen that you're looking at is on that page. There's not a thing that you're going to be looking at that isn't on that page. So if you want to go through it piece by piece, it's all on there. And the audio hookup, as Vic has just described, is stunningly simple. It's one cable, to answer Johnny's question. As to our standards, without getting technical, and I'm nowhere the engineer that Vic is, very simply, all of those MP3s that we produce in-house, and we produced hundreds of them, are all 128 kbps. That is basically CD or near CD quality. There were a couple of exceptions in the very earliest days of this project where some of them were created at 96. In the case of one of those producers, I actually asked him to recreate all of those files at 96. Quite frankly, they're perfectly acceptable, but since you'll see the 96 up there and think you're getting something less than excellent, I've asked him to recreate it. He thought I had a little bit of, corkscrew, if you will, but I asked him to do it anyway. So
this ends the front side of your cassette.
Audio-wise, before you get too technical going into the future and making unrealistic high-fidelity demands, never forget the purpose for which we're doing it, the vinyl, Hilton Yak, most typical, systems from which we are coming, and even a relatively simply done recording and all that will be generally, at the very least, as good as the sound that you've always had. And if you spend a little bit of time, as Vic has described, doing some cleaning, doing some filtering, and we do a lot of filtering on things, you really can get a far superior product. As one specific example, the Blue Star tune, I Found a New Baby, was, I believe, overloaded on the very first day that the vinyl came out. It's no longer available. We have redone it on an MP3, and we did all of the gags and tricks that Vic did up there. We actually have a better MP3 than the vinyl ever was. So this is the kind of technology that is now available. Last comment, the web address, although it's listed as supremeaudio.com, we've actually removed all Square Dance content from Supreme Audio. That's now just Fitness and Tap Jazz Ballet, and we put it as a hosted by site under dosado.com/music, or if you just go to Dosado, there's a banner at the top. When you're looking at the resulting Handhurst page, if you look in the right-hand column, there's a 1/3 column there. It says MP3s right at the top. Everything that relates to MP3s, any page, is all in that one column. And when you go to any one of those pages, all of those links will be repeated, or said differently, you're only one click away from any other answer you might need. Thank you. DOSADO. And if you want to go to dosido.com, I own that name too, and it takes you to Dosado anyway.
Ooh.
I'm Charlie Deal from Massachusetts, and I'd like to know what the copyright considerations are on all of this music copying that we're talking about, both output and where we get it from.
Well, as long as you have bought a copy of you've bought the original record, the original CD, or the original MP3 file, you can make as many copies for yourself as for backup, for whatever, and use it as many as you'd like. You cannot give a copy to a friend and say, here's some nice music, why don't you use this? And you can't, and it's illegal to copy, from others if you haven't purchased the music.
I'd like to add one thing. It's also illegal to make a copy of your record and then sell your record. Okay? You need to keep your record. That'd be like having your cake and eating it too. All right, so if you record your record, you still need to own your record, and then you can use the MP3. I'd also like to add that not only is it illegal to do any of those copying kinds of things, it's also cutting our own throats, because unless the record producers can make money, they're not going to produce records. And I think new music is important in what we do.
On the same subject, Andy Pennock from Edmonton, Alberta. I noticed on your last page that your paperwork here is copyrighted, which means that we cannot reproduce without your permission. Is that correct?
You may reproduce this. I put this on the bottom of. I'm putting this on my website, and I put this on the bottom of all my pages there. So you can make as many copies of this as you'd like.
Thank you.
Follow-on question. I understand that some of the MP3 files that are available are now have protection in them to prevent copying. Does this raise any kind of problem in this process, or is this not actually in effect yet?
Okay. The MP3 files that they are making for Square Dance records have, as far as I know, Bill, no copy protection on them. Yes, MP3 is it's actually a patented algorithm, and there are some issues with distribution of MP3s and whether you need to pay royalties on those and things like that. Also, one of the issues that I was talking about with the NetMD and copying MP3s from your computer to these mini disc players that are using a networked mechanism, they have some copy protection in them in that you can only download an MP3 3 times before you have to upload it, so to speak, and you can only have 3 copies floating around using their software. So copy protection is something that is going to come up more, I think, if you're trying to use alternative music, not square dance music, but alternative music for your calling, because there are some CDs that are copy protected. I've heard of CDs that you put them into your computer and you can't play them because they are designed, they've put some mechanism in there that makes it so they can only be played on audio CD players. And they are working harder and harder at making it harder and harder to copy music. I don't think so far that that's an issue in square dancing. The CDs that Tom and the record producers are making are not copy protected. The MP3s are not copy protected. It's up to you to not abuse that.
It's Tim Cropper from near Toronto, Canada. Hey, I got like 600 things recorded on my mini disc player, and I got like 50, 60 songs on my laptop now, but I can never remember the words to the song. Is there like a single click solution so that if I just click on the title of the song, the words come up and... Sound like a loaded switch. It's $150 in my pocket.
Okay, all right. Actually, there are a couple of solutions to that. If you would like to single click on the name of your song, like in your just your regular disk system, Andy Shore came up with an interesting solution of writing an HTML page that has an embed object where you would bring up the HTML and it would start playing the song and would also have the lyrics there as HTML. And I believe he put that on his webpage, which is www.moveto.com/SD. Okay, and that solution is there. Now, the solution that I use and that I am totally enamored of is CSDS, which is the Cedar Square Dance system, which is a combination system that both allows you to do choreography and to play MP3s at a dance. And in fact, the reason I bought this particular computer, this is my square dance calling computer. If you'll read Vic's handout, you'll notice that he says he really likes large screens and stuff. What I really like is lightweight. Okay? And so I have this computer. It only runs Vic's program. That's all I use it for. And I carry it to all my dances. It's got about 500 MP3s on it, but I've just gotten started. This is a Sony Vaio SRX 77. It came out last month. So, how much? $1,600 about. Sony Vaio, V-A-I-O, SRX 77. But there are lots of small computers you can get. I'm not recommending that one in particular. It was just I just enjoyed the contrast in size. If you'll look at the two computers, you can see that you can go pretty portable or really portable.
Yeah, I'm actually impressed with this one. I might look into getting one. As long as we're on the kind of the subject of computers, it's like one thing I do a lot when I'm on stage is I'm like, moving around and jumping around and stuff. You got digital music playing, you're not going to bump the record player, you're not going to, move the needle here and make some awful noise, or, there's no really false restarts and not, dropping the needle on the turntable instead of the record and that kind of stuff.
Vic, would you bring up CSDS to show Tim your single click solution to playing music?
Well, I'm somewhat trying to avoid this. Well, because you're not supposed to have like self-promotion and stuff like that.
Couple questions. Yeah, well, he's bringing it up. I got a couple questions. First of all, I know Chris Jensen is a Mac person, so am I, and I know Vic's program don't run on Macs. Is there something coming out for Macs, or is there anybody working on Macintosh stuff?
As far as I know, there's nobody working on a program for the Macintosh. It's just too small a market. There are a couple of solutions. One is to buy another computer,
Okay, yeah, that's what I'm thinking about.
The other one is, and I've tried this, is to run Virtual PC on a Macintosh and run VIX program within Virtual PC. It works, but it didn't feel fast enough to me. It was as fast as my old computer, and I was looking for something faster. So I can run it in Virtual PC on this computer, on my Macintosh, and it works.
My last question is, I've got mini disc, and I went to the National Convention, went to go call in the Plus Hall, had no idea of how to hook my system into the Hilton. I know how to do it on my Micro 100. Can you talk about how to hook laptops into what they might have set up at the National Convention? Or
you need to have 3 different connectors at all times. You need to have a mini plug, the 1/8-inch plug that goes into the new Hiltons, like this one here. You need to have an RCA plug that goes into the medium old Hiltons, and you need to have the 1/4-inch plugs that go into the older style Hilton. My solution is I have one, and I have various adapters that go on. This is an RCA adapter. It goes on to my 1/4-inch plug. So I'm set for any particular Hilton that I come across.
Yeah, I always carry a little bag around with all sorts of different little connectors because all these things are different. I mean, you put them in front, you put them here, you put them behind. This thing here is a little Hilton, what do they call it? A booster, a signal booster. It's about $50. You might be able to get something like this. Someone's got something like this from Radio Shack for like 10 or 20 bucks. And basically what this does is it's got a little control on it, which basically boosts the volume. Because sometimes, like on the Hilton 75s, there's not enough oomph in there to read your signal from the computer. So you just use this, and you can adjust the volume with this too. I definitely recommend getting one of these. It also helps if you're, if you didn't record your signal low enough, or you don't have your wave output set right, you can tweak this. Okay, what I've got here, this is one of the screens from my program, and this is just one way you can organize your music. This is a database of music here. I've got the title, the label number, the rating, how much I like it, flags that tell me what kind of music it is, and I've got loops that I can set to go to for automatic pattern looping. When I bring up a file, let's take, how about this one? Just double click on it. I've got it configured so it automatically brings up a cue sheet. So I've got the words, because I can't remember words no matter what, even on songs I've done hundreds of times. And you can also use the computer for bringing up lists of calls. Like right here is the music player I have embedded in my program. This is running the Microsoft Music Player. And these little 2 tick marks here are where I've set the loop to automatically do looping. And the way that kind of stuff happens is, let's take that record that we just played with, the one that we hacked up, and add that. I'm going to go to Add Record. I'll go find it. It's up here. Oops, up one more. Here's a jingle, jangle, jingle again. So I've just added this to the database on the screen here. And so we can play it. There it is. So what you do with the loop, is you go down to the loop tab here, play the record. 7, 8, 1. So I usually set it on beat 1. Then I take this little indicator bar, which shows you where you are in the music, drag it out somewhere near the end, play it again. 5, 6, 7, 8, 1. And click it again. I've set 2 loops. Press this little test loop button, and it will show me what the loop sounds like. That's a pretty bad one. But you can go in and reset it until you get it just right. And you can actually go in and edit the actual time where the loop is to set it however you want.
Sorry. Can you erase the loop that you put in there by mistake and put a new one? How do you do that?
There's a clear button.
Clear, okay.
It's gone. Verifies that you want to do that so you don't screw up some loop you've already set. Mm-hmm. And, the loops are, normally when we're, doing this and we put it down here, it's like you put it in some random spot. These loops here that are done by the software aren't as smooth as they might be done on an MD player. but they're much smoother than a record one. As long as you pick it at a 64 beat place, and you've got a good loop.
I was going to say he has some other features here that I use a lot, like the tempo. You can actually count beats on it if you're worried about the tempo of your music. So if he'll play the music and then there's a BPM place, and this is one of the things that I do on airplanes a lot, is I sit there and play music and count beats. He's tapping the key in time with the music, and then there you get your beats per minute. So that shows up there, you'll see, and then when you're actually at the dance, you can go to the controls, and while you're playing it, you can change the tempo or change it back down.
So this could be dancer dependent, depending on what kind of crowd you're calling to.
Oh. Vic, you didn't undo that?
Yes. You might want to play your record through once you've recorded it and make sure it sounds fine before you actually use it, right?
Wait.
If you change the tempo, can you save it at that tempo then?
What we've got right here is a music player. Okay. With the music player, you normally can't do that. With my program, if you've changed the tempo, it's automatically saved in the database. So the next time, it'll automatically come up at that same tempo you last used it at. But in general, if you want to make a tempo change, it's usually more efficient to do it. If a permanent tempo change, it's usually more efficient to do it before you create the MP3 file.
Norm Wilcox. Again, Vic, you might want to point out your quick list option. If you got 1,500 records stored in your database and you want to find a record, there's a neat option. I use it a lot to pre-select maybe 10 or 12 tunes for a dance, stick it in this quick list, and now I only have to search through 12 tunes to 1,500.
Right. Most of the players that are available out there have something called a playlist, which is where you can put you know how when you go to a dance, you've got your whole big, huge record case, you plop it there, and kind of, before the dance, you pick out, I'll do these singers and these patterns, and you kind of pick a little pile of, 8 to 10 records that you're going to use. Well, it's the same idea on the computer. Like right now, this database is a listing of almost 2,000 records, or, you can go some file in your, or some directory in your computer and have lots of records listed. Well, you'd like to take maybe the 10 that you want to play at that dance, put them somewhere so you can easily grab them when you want them. And so a playlist, or as Norm said, what I have in my program I call it a quick list, is I put records in there, and then when I'm at the dance, let's get out of there, nope, dance, oh, here's the music player. I just hit Q for quick list. It brings up the ones that I've stuck in the quick list right here. Then I just pick whatever one I want. I love that, TNT, Alpine Hoedown. That's an old one.
Okay, we should mention that there are other pieces of software that perform similar functions for playing MP3s. There are lots of MP3 playing software. There's software designed for DJs that does a lot of the pitch shifting, tempo changing kinds of things with playlists and allows you to organize your discs. What Vic adds to that is the whole ability to bring up a set of lyrics, and also Vic's program adds the choreographic information if you want to have like a bunch of singing calls that are easily available to you while you're calling. So, I seriously considered writing my own program for the Macintosh because I really do prefer Macintoshes, but when I looked at the amount of work involved in that and I looked at what Vic's program offered, it wasn't worth it to write my own. It just really wasn't. So, thanks, Vic.
Oh. Vic, did you go and type in all of the lyrics to every singing call that's on there? Did you physically type them in yourself?
Oh, of course not.
Or did Debbie?
Yes.
That means that's another extra step of work that we automatically do. Also, we wouldn't want to take our MD players, with our MD disc, with our thousands of records already dealt with, and transfer them to the laptop. We want to take the original vinyls and do that. That's advantageous, right?
That's probably a better way to do it.
Dan Koff from New Jersey. You've got these various different files. Can you put these things in a fallback, regroup? When you've got your lyric sheets, can you run them through a scanner and then feed it into this program, or do you have to type it in manually?
Well, I mean, however you get it into the computer is fine. You can scan it in. Of course, when you scan it in, you're creating a big graphics file. When you've got it typed in, it's a little teeny text file. So, Oh, okay. Yeah, you can do that. Scan that in, make a text file. An OCR, an optical
character recognition. And the problem with that is, I mean, it's fine for the newer cue sheets, and I could have done that for the newer cue sheets. Some of the ones that I put in are like 30 years old, and the cue sheets are very ragged, and the optical character recognition would have done a worse job than me just typing it. That's why I did that option.
And also, Debbie corrects all the typos when she types in.
Don Beck, Massachusetts. I'm hearing a hint to the record manufacturers that since I'm sure they type their stuff into their computer before they create these files, maybe they could include the text file of the...
Yeah. In fact, some of them do already.
Funny you should mention that.
Funny you should mention that.
Bill Hyman, New Hampshire. Yes, Don, we've already done that. We started over a year ago. In all of the new MP3 releases, be it old music that's been recycled in the sense of we may or may not still have vinyl, we always provide a doc file, a Word doc file that you can open. Most of those doc files are in fact true character doc files. Having said that, a number of them, especially from some of the older cue sheets, are simply really not OCR scannable, or else you spend 2 hours correcting everything. We've made a decision. We actually do scan it in as a bitmap, and we actually do a little bit of touching up. We've actually gotten pretty good at that and taking off the old yellow paper color and all. You can do that in a graphics program. Our young webmaster is quite a diligent mouseketeer, and he does all those things very happily, and every once in a while puts a monkey head on the top of the caller's picture up in the right-hand corner, too. Which we did send a proof to Tony Oxendine for one of his callers, and we inserted some other picture there. In any event, you always get a doc file with it as good as possible. In the case of Hi-Hat, we're putting out a whole series of new releases. These are magnificent doc files. They're actually 2-page doc files that have a mainstream call, and then the next page is the full cue sheet again, except it's got an advanced call. So it's not as if it's just one paragraph off to the right. It's really the complete cue sheet, so if you're calling the program. But we're trying to be as careful as possible. We're trying very hard to keep file sizes down, but there are some compromises on the older files.
It would be nice also if the new vinyl that's produced would have a place where you could download the lyric files also, since some of us are transferring vinyl to MP3s.
Greg Anderson, Colorado. I've got a question about... Here I am. I've got a question about using a laptop. I would love to convert from the mini disc and CDs to laptop, and I had already spoken with Vic earlier about one of my hang-ups is not being able to use the remote control that I've grown accustomed to with my mini disc player and my CD player. But even beyond that, a more basic question. I do a lot of parties outdoors, and I'm very concerned about dust and the weather elements. Is it totally unthinkable to even consider using a laptop outdoors? If not, do you need to cover at least the keyboard or something with saran wrap, or does that then create heat retention problems? What do I need? What are my considerations there for outdoor use?
Definitely using a laptop outdoors is a little more problematic. I've done it several times. I've gotten dust all over my screen. Seeing the screen in bright sunlight is like next to impossible. So you need to be in shade, or one time I was calling and a storm came in. It was like rain and wind, and quickly get this laptop out of there. But yeah, that's definitely a problem.
Quick additional comment, Bill Hyman. I certainly endorse Vic's program, and if you're getting into this seriously, that is really the simplest way to get the whole thing organized in one shot, and everything is in there. For those of you who are just starting on MP3s and are not prepared to take that conceptual or, to a certain extent, financial step, the old alternate tab combination on Windows machines, you open up the Word doc file, then alternate tab, open up your player, or you have your program set where the icons where you have that, and you simply hit the play button, alternate tab, and the
words pop up above that screen. You can see the screen that is behind the screen there. That would be your word screen, and once you've hit the start button, just flip it or alternate or set up 2 separate windows depending on the size of your screen and how you like to read your window.
One thing I'd like to mention while Debbie's going over there is I did notice there's some handouts out front that says How to Use Digital Music for Square and Round Dancing by Dan Prosser. And he's got some CD here that seems to have a lot of the things. It has a player and other stuff. He's trying to sell these things. So this might be a quick way to quickly get a whole bunch of programs on your computer that will do this kind of stuff, the editing, the playing, and all that stuff. Because otherwise you have to go around the web and download different programs from different places. And I think he's put a package together here.
Jerry Justin, would you consider a special price for your package, including your wife, to put on our words?
I wouldn't have given you the mic if I knew you answer.
I think the wife should answer that.
I think the wife did answer that for the room, and for the tape it was no. Anyway, for a serious question, why is it harder to mark the loop on the computer program than it is on the MD player, the mini disc?
Well, primarily because the files on the computer don't have, I mean, pretty much only Square Dance users would want to do this marking and looping stuff. It's not part of the MP3 specification, and I mean, certainly the players have an auto loop function that, like, when you get to the end, it'll start over again. But I mean, you don't want that. You want it to start, 16 beats before the end and start, 16 beats after the start, the loop.
Well, I want it to start again wherever the music repeats itself.
Right.
At that particular point in the song.
There are some things that are starting to go out there. For example, this Winamp program that I haven't really talked about yet. This is a player that's available for free. You can download a lot of things called plugins, and this thing up here at the top is the Chronotron plugin, which is the plugin that'll allow you to change the tempo without changing the pitch. And you can load in these different plugins. There is a plugin out there for setting a loop. However, you have to set that. You have to go in and set. It's kind of nasty to set it each time when you load a new record. You have to go in physically, type in the numbers or whatever you have to do to set the loop. So there's no real clean way to do that. And like my program, it's not actually telling here's the loop. My program's just sitting in the background going, what time is it? What time is it? It keeps asking the music player what time it is, where you are, and when it gets to a certain spot, then it sets it to where at the beginning or at the beginning of the loop. So like my program's going in the background going, what time is it? What time is it? What time is it? Like a hungry dog or something.
But you push the button to make it loop, to identify it.
Yes. But in the background, the program's just cycling on and on and on.
Okay, and where would one get a copy of your program? Where do we get your program, Vic?
Here.
Where?
It's
okay.
on the handout.
Okay, thank you.
All the
Thank you,
information's
Vic.
on the handout. That was easy. Are there any more questions, comments, or?
One quick question. Is there a convention discount?
I'm Lynn Webster from the Twin Cities. My question is, if we all bought laptops and brought them to next year's CALLERLAB convention, would you be willing to help us work on it?
Sure. I prefer email so that I can have plenty of time to think about what the problem is. But certainly going the computer route, there's a lot of setup, configuration, learning curves, learning new software, new stuff, learning where to plug the thing in for the optimal, sound and everything. So there's definitely a learning curve. There's an expense, of course, buying the laptop. But I mean, there's lots of advantages. I've got 2,000 pieces of music on my laptop here. If I go to a dance, some caller wants to call singing call with me, I've pretty much probably got it here. Last night up at the after dance, I put on some old Bruce Johnson records from 78 that I have recorded on here, and we danced a little bit of that. So you can put in other music, party music, whatever you want. In fact, tonight, Chris and I are both going to be at the alternative music dance, and we're going to put on a couple of selections and call to, so you can see some of the things we've brought in from other sources.
Let me just say, I missed talking about alternative music sources on here. I talked about the 3 sources that you can get square dance music. That if you want non-square dance music to use for calling, you can find that on the net and in other various places. And of course, that would virtually all be digital. You can find it on CD, you can find it on MP3. But the one thing I wanted to mention was using MIDI as a possibility. You can find lots of freely available MIDI files online. MIDI is not a sound format. It's a format that tells your computer how to create the sound. It's like, if, for an example, it'd be like a player piano roll. You know, player piano roll doesn't have actual music, but it tells the piano how to make the music. And a MIDI file isn't actual music, but it's telling the computer how to make the music. And as a consequence, they're very, very small. A MIDI file can be as small as 17 to 34 kilobytes. Okay, so we're talking very small. A lot of the MIDIs on the network on the web are very ticky-tacky. You know, you wouldn't want to use them, but there's some nice ones, and I'm actually going to be using one tonight. I think for when I'm calling alternative music, I'll be using a MIDI file that I turned into an MP3 for purposes of using it here, but I have it as a MIDI file. So that's something to consider when you're looking for alternative music, is check out the MIDI sources and listen to them and think about using them. Okay.
Dottie Welch from Nova Scotia. I've been scratching my head to try to figure out how I would deal with the way I normally call on a computer screen, because I normally would have, first of all, you're dealing with playing the music, so that's one whole aspect of it. And then there's the choreography. And if I'm doing something and heading towards a singing call, you're worrying about the singing figure and making sure the dancers can do that. And maybe you're worrying about the tip choreography, and you're also worrying about the lyrics of the song. Plus, you've got on the side that you're playing the music and you're looping it back. And I can't figure out how I would deal with all of that simultaneously. Can you show me what possibilities there are there?
Well, that's what callers do anyway, right? We're always doing lots of different things at once. You need to be comfortable with whatever you're doing. So I do not suggest go buy my program, put in something, and go call with it exclusively, for example. That's not a good idea, because something is bound to happen. You're going to hit Control-Alt-Delete, or something's going to happen to the computer, right? You should gradually get into it. You know, record a few songs, download some MP3s, you know, take it to your local club only for a while until you get used to using it. You know, things can happen to the computer. You know, it can crash, the hard disk can go, or whatever. I've got a backup of a CD that has actually like 360 MP3 files on it, and then I have a backup of the programs that I would need to run those. So if something happens to my laptop, all I have to do is find another laptop somewhere. Those should be pretty easy to find. Part of the problem you're concerned about is there's a learning curve. And, you know, if you've got a simple one-key thing to do different things, you know, load music, play, stop, it's fairly easy. If you've got to use the mouse and navigate around and click on something, it's a little bit harder when you're calling to do things.
Jerry Justin, I'll be serious this time. I really was serious last time. I was just going to go along the same thing. I was just talking about how hard it was going to be, because I resisted the mini discs for a long time, and I started carrying both. And then as I got into the mini discs, I find, because I cue and call on the nights, that I had to have 2 mini discs. I had to be a disc jockey to make it work out timing-wise and not do it. And I can see that I'm going to have records, a mini disc, and a computer to start with as I get better with it. And I'm getting better with the mini discs all the time. I'm using less and less records. And so it is a learning curve. You are in the know right now of the media, and I know you can't foretell the future or we'd all be rich. But he would be. He would be rich. In a few years, what am I going to be looking at trading my computer in for? You know, I'm not being facetious. I'm just saying, it's changed so much so fast now, and it's changing.
It's still changing.
I realize
you're going to have a little cell phone that's going to be able to play MP3s, and you can watch DVDs while you're calling, and everything all in one little handheld device.
Can we skip to that?
Hardware isn't here yet. Dan Koff from New Jersey. I work in a computer center, and if you do go this route with computerized. Do make sure that you have thorough backups of everything, because computers fail, and probably at the least opportune moment. So back everything up. Have a backup. He has the CDs. That's good for some things, but if you have some things on there, until you can get the thing back, you're going to have, or if all else fails, the entire computer suffers a meltdown. The lightning strikes while you're outside. All right, you want to have all of them available again as fast as possible, so you want to have a thorough backup of all of your MP3, your WAV files, your programs, everything. So do make sure you make backups on computer stuff.
And you can't have enough backups. Make 2 or 3, make a backup every month, whatever. Because as soon as you stop making backups, that's when something's going to happen.
Tom Dillon, Kentucky. I'm going to back up just a second. I hope I can. When we were talking about transferring the records over to some medium, okay, where we're dealing with the computer up here, you don't have to use a computer. There's a thing out there called a sonic maximizer. It's a piece of equipment. It's not very expensive. It's not too expensive, and it also has noise reduction built into it, so that you can play the records on the fly and adjust to your ears what you want while you're recording into a CD player or your computer or a mini disc or whatever. So you don't have to do it all in the computer. If you're not into the computer age yet, then you can buy this piece of inexpensive equipment, about $250. It's called a sonic maximizer, and it'll take scratchy records. It'll clean them up. It takes out the noise. And you also have on the other side of it a knob to add back the fidelity to get the sound back where you want it. So that can eliminate a step if you're not ready to jump in the computer all at one time. Okay.
Now we got about 5 more minutes here. Chris might have something.
I was just going to say, to address Dottie's issue of doing it all at once. Yes, you need to practice, but if you could bring up your call from dance screen on there, I'll just talk through how I organize a little bit to call a dance. Notice that he's got a main screen, and he's got off to the right-hand side, there are a bunch of what he calls frames that can contain choreography. What I do is, in those frames, I usually have singing call figures, and each frame you can bring up with a single click to look at. So you can look at the singing call figure before you're going to use it to decide what you're going to call during your patter section. He also has a couple of frames, if you look down at the bottom of that list, where he has documents, one of which he has is a mainstream list and a plus list. I will make an outline for a dance, and the document can be anything in there, and I'll make an outline for the dance and keep that in one of the frames. So I bring that up to look at to see what my plan is for that dance. And so that's how I'm organized. And then when you bring up the player and you're playing music, then you get the lyrics in the main frame. But you can still jump to the other frames to look at singing call figures and then jump back to the music, to the lyrics frame. And it's all single keystroke, so you just get used to working with it, and it takes some time to get used to it. But it does work, and you can keep all of those bits of information that I used to have scattered all over the table. You can keep it in one place.
Charlie Deal from Massachusetts again. Are zip drives high enough rate and enough capacity to handle this sort of thing for backup or transfer?
You mean like an iOmega 100 megabyte zip drive and stuff? Those, certainly you can store backup MP3 files on that. Yes, the crazy man in the back.
The program, and I've been working with Chris on it and learning the program a little bit. It's like everything else that we buy that's new right now. There's so many things on it that it's going to take a while to do it all. But it has the capabilities, if I remember this correctly, of keeping track of the written figures that you use and the date you use it in the program, so that you can go back and check when you last used this figure. It will also check in a list of people at your dances and tell you when they've been there, and it also works as a computer squared up program. Am I correct in all those?
Yes. Any more? Oh, zip drives would be fine for backup. Yeah, you just won't. You'll probably need several of them, though. I mean, because each MP3 file is probably, say, 2 megabytes, so you can hold 50 on a drive, more or less.
and they aren't fast enough for real-time playing of them. I use zips. Talking 4 questions ago, we had a question about format. For the next however long, 5, 10 years, I think all of us can assume that we're going to be carrying at least minimum music in more than one format. If you go to CDs, having been in MP3s, you'll probably have in the trunk your MP3 player and a couple 3 discs. If you go right to computer from vinyl, you'll probably keep your Hilton 75 and 40 or 50 records where you can get at them as backup. Will you need them? If you're lucky, no. If you need them, you'll be glad to have them where you can get at them. But the day of the single format caller is a long way off, both in the future and in the past.
That sounds like a good note to end on. Thank you very much for attending the session, and thanks, Chris.